The rain fell soft that day. Not in sheets, not in thunder, just soft, like a breath held too long, finally exhaled. It dampened the dust of the main road, clung to the porch rails, kissed the tops of heads like a farewell no one asked for. Beneath that weeping sky stood a woman in gray. She wasn't old, though sorrow made her seem so. 24, with wheat blonde hair matted to her temples, feet bare against wet planks, and hands clenched quietly in front of her. Her name was Coraline. No one said it aloud. Not anymore. The platform was makeshift, 3 planks atop 2 crates, and behind her stood a woman who spoke too loud for the mood. Mrs. Larrabee, her mother-in-law, red-faced with spite, pointed one heavy hand toward Coraline, as if displaying a broken chair. She's still strong enough to clean and cook, no debts, no disease. She just can't give no babies. Useless to my son, rest his soul. I'll take $1 and not a penny less. $1 for a day, a week, a lifetime, I don't care. The townsfolk stood back, half under the awning of the general store, half beneath umbrellas of their own decency. No one rushed forward. A few looked to the preacher, who looked to the ground. The sheriff wasn't present. Maybe on purpose. Coraline didn't tremble. She didn't cry. If anything, her stillness unsettled them more than sobbing would have. A girl should wail when she's being sold, they thought. She should plead, resist, collapse. But Coraline only stared beyond them, as if watching something far past the buildings, past the hills, past all of them. Her dress was a dull gray cotton, once white, washed too many times in cold water and sorrow. The hem was torn, the sleeves stitched and restitched by tired hands. The rain made it cling to her like skin. She didn't move to shake it off. A man stepped forward finally. Kyle Granger, owner of the saloon, cane in one hand and a pipe in the other. "I'll take her," he muttered, dropping a silver dollar onto the board without even looking at Coraline. "Could use someone to mop up the floor and fetch bottles." Mrs. Larrabee clapped her hands once, sharp as a slap. "Sold." Coraline's head did not move. But something behind her eyes flickered. Barely, like the final glow of a fire. She turned, just slightly, to step down from the platform. She didn't look at the man who'd bought her. What would be the point? And then came hoofbeats. Slow, even. No one looked up at first. They'd all grown used to horses bringing more trouble than peace. But when the rider dismounted and the sound of 2 faint cries floated on the rain, heads turned. The man was tall, soaked to the bone, his coat hanging heavy with water. His beard was short, ragged from travel. In his arms, wrapped tight against the weather, were 2 bundles. They squirmed and whimpered, infants, both, red-faced and restless. He said nothing as he approached the platform. Just stared for a long moment at Coraline, rain running down his hat brim, pooling at his boots. Mrs. Larrabee scowled. "We're done here, stranger. She's sold." The man looked at her, then at Kyle Granger, then back to Coraline. His voice was low, roughened by trail dust and days without comfort. "She's not yours to sell." The words drifted in the rain, quiet as they were. Mrs. Larrabee sneered. "She's my dead son's wife. Useless now. Law says I got say over where she goes." "No," the man replied simply. "Law says people ain't property. Least not the good kind." He stepped forward and pulled from inside his coat 1 crumpled coin, a single silver dollar, and set it gently on the platform beside the first. The gesture wasn't loud. It didn't shout or demand. But it silenced the small crowd with something else entirely. "She comes with me," he said. "Not as wife. Not as servant. Just, she don't belong here." Coraline looked up. Just slightly. And he looked back at her, not with hunger or pity, but with something quieter. Recognition. As if he'd once stood on that same platform, in a different shape, and known the feel of rain and shame all the same. "What's your name?" Mrs. Larrabee spat. "Sam McAllister." "Don't know you." "You don't have to." Kyle shifted on his heels. "I already paid." Sam turned toward him. "You want the coin back?" "No," the saloon keeper said after a moment. "Keep it. She wouldn't last long in my place anyhow." Coraline stepped down from the platform. Still barefoot. Still silent. She walked to Sam slowly, each step soft in the mud, her body moving like she wasn't sure she was real. When she reached him, he didn't speak. He just shifted the weight of the babies in his arms so she could help, and she did, gently taking one, her arms folding around it like she was born for it. Her hands, which had been clenched for days, finally opened. The baby stopped crying. No one spoke as they walked away together. The rain still fell, soft and steady. They passed the general store, the blacksmith, the shuttered church. No one called out. Even Mrs. Larrabee didn't scream again. Coraline didn't ask where they were going. She didn't ask who the children were, or why a man like him would offer shelter to a woman like her. She just held the child close and kept walking. That night, she lay beneath a roof that didn't leak, in a room that smelled of cedar and milk. The baby in her arms slept, fingers curled tight around one of hers. She watched it in the dark, unable to sleep, wondering if perhaps this was a dream she'd soon wake from. In the next room, Sam paced quietly with the second infant, murmuring something too soft to be words. No promises had been made. No names exchanged beyond what was needed. But when the wind changed and the rain turned to mist, Coraline closed her eyes and whispered to no one at all. Maybe this time I won't have to leave. And somewhere deep inside, where pain had once laid roots, something small and fragile began to bloom. The cabin sat low on the edge of pine and pasture, its shingles uneven, its windows stubborn in their frames. The rain had passed by the time they arrived, though it left the earth wet and soft beneath Coraline's bare feet. The horse, black and calm, didn't resist the hitching post, and Sam said nothing as he pushed open the front door and stepped aside for her to enter first. Coraline paused on the threshold. She still held one of the babies close to her chest, and the child's breath tickled against her collarbone. Her hair clung damply to her cheeks, and though she had not spoken since the platform, her silence had shifted from numb to alert. She was watching again, as though taking measure of what this place might ask of her. The inside of the cabin smelled of wood smoke, sour milk, and pine tar. It was neither tidy nor filthy, just lived in, like the man who had brought her here. A low fire burned in the hearth, and on the far side of the room, beneath the window, stood two wooden cribs, rough-hewn but solid. One had a quilt draped over the side, faded blues and reds stitched in crooked diamonds. The other held nothing but a folded cloth and a wooden rattle. Sam crossed the room, laid the baby in his arms into the empty crib, and stepped back. He didn't check to see if Coraline followed. She had. She moved quietly, her steps barely creaking, and laid the other twin beside its brother or sister. She didn't know which, and adjusted the swaddle without being told. Sam watched her for a moment, then turned to hang his coat. Rainwater dripped in a slow rhythm from its hem onto the floorboards. "You can sleep in the loft," he said at last, voice low. "It's dry, and the stove heat reaches it some. Ain't got another bed yet." Coraline only nodded. She didn't ask questions. Not yet. The next morning he found her already up, her hair braided neatly, the hem of her dress pinned where it had torn. She had boiled water, cleaned the hearth, and was holding one of the twins while rocking gently on the bench near the window. He didn't say thank you. She didn't ask for it. There was an understanding, faint but certain, blooming between them like frost melting into dew. It had no shape yet, only a rhythm. He would feed the livestock, she would keep the children warm. He would chop wood, she would bake the bread. No formal words passed between them, no declaration of duties, yet each day formed a quiet partnership. Coraline learned quickly. She learned the baby's cries, the difference between hunger and fear, gas and loneliness. She learned which crib squeaked and how to fix it. She didn't ask about the children's mother. Sam didn't speak of her, and Coraline understood enough to leave ghosts alone. She did ask, finally, for the children's names. Sam was sanding down a fence post on the porch when she stepped outside, apron dusted with flour, arms folded beneath her chest. The twins were asleep. "What do I call them?" she asked softly. He didn't look up right away. Just kept sanding. "Jacob and Eli." "Which is which?" He paused, glanced at the open window behind her, then nodded toward the crib on the left. "Jacob's the quiet one. Eli kicks in his sleep." Coraline nodded. That was enough. Some nights, Sam would fall asleep in the rocking chair, one of the babies curled into his chest, while Coraline sat near the fire mending socks or fixing the worn corners of the baby blankets. They didn't speak much, but their silence grew companionable. The kind that feels less like absence and more like trust. A few times, neighbors came by. Widow Gray brought over a pot of beans and 2 jars of pickled peaches, offering no questions and only a knowing look at Coraline. The blacksmith's wife passed on a basket of old baby clothes. No one said anything cruel. Not yet. Still, Coraline didn't go into town. She wasn't sure she belonged to it anymore. Her mind sometimes returned to the voice of her mother-in-law, sharp, accusing, full of certainty. Useless. Barren. A burden to bury. The words didn't ring as often now, but they lived inside her like old wasp nests. Dry, silent, but not yet emptied. Sam never touched her. Never asked for more than she gave. And that, perhaps, unraveled her more than any harshness could have. There were moments when she caught his eyes resting on her, not with desire, but with something gentler. Curiosity, perhaps. A sense of puzzle. Once, she cut her palm on the edge of the iron skillet, and he moved to help wrap it, clumsily tearing a piece of his shirt to make a bandage. She flinched, not from the pain, but from the nearness. He stopped immediately, handed her the cloth and said, "You don't have to let me." And she nodded. Not because she agreed, but because she didn't yet know how to say thank you for a man who didn't take what wasn't offered. The babies grew fatter with each week. Their cries became less frantic. Coraline sang to them, soft songs she remembered from childhood. Songs that came back like drifting feathers, unexpected and whole. One afternoon, as she peeled potatoes by the back door, she caught Sam watching her. Not directly, but from the barn's shadow. His sleeves were rolled, his hands raw from fence work. He looked older in the sun, not from age, but from weight. A man who had carried too much and didn't know how to set it down. She returned his gaze only briefly, then bent her head back to the task. The silence between them felt like the edge of something. Not love, not yet, but maybe the clearing before it. The cribs creaked less now. Coraline had tightened the joints and added folded cloth beneath the legs to stop the rocking. She spent hours near them, reading aloud from an old Bible she found beneath the bed upstairs. Not because she believed in all the words, but because the rhythm soothed the children, and maybe herself. One night, a sudden storm rattled the windows. Eli woke first, then Jacob, their cries sharp and full of fear. Sam rose from the floor where he'd been fixing a loose board and froze as Coraline stepped in ahead of him, wrapping both boys in one blanket and holding them close. She hummed a lullaby, not one Sam knew. Something southern, mournful and slow. He stood in the doorway watching. The lantern behind him cast his shadow across the wall behind her. Coraline rocked gently, her lips just above the baby's ears. When they quieted, she turned slightly, her eyes finding his. For once, she didn't look away. "You don't owe me anything," she said. "I know." She adjusted the blanket, settled the twins back into their cribs. The wind howled outside, but the room had gone still. "But I'd like to stay," she added. Sam didn't move. Just nodded once. The next morning, there was a wooden chair beside hers at the window bench. A second cup beside the coffee pot. His way of saying welcome. It wasn't love. Not yet. But it was something like trust. And trust, Coraline thought, might just be a better place to begin. Spring didn't announce itself with trumpet or thunder. It crept in, quiet and unassuming, softening the last frost in the soil and coaxing the first stubborn greens from the earth. Coraline noticed it first in the sound of dripping eaves, in the way the breeze lost its bite, in the twins' faces brightening as the cabin grew less cold. Morning light fell more gently through the windows now, brushing her face as she rocked Eli in her lap, humming a tune that had no words. The days settled into rhythm. Sam worked the fields and split wood, tending the fence where winter had split it apart. Coraline kept the hearth warm, mended clothes, stirred pots, changed linens, soothed cries. The twins had grown rounder, stronger. Jacob had begun laughing in short gasps like hiccups. Eli, more solemn, watched everything with wide, quiet eyes. It wasn't a love story yet. It was something softer, deeper, like moss taking root in stone cracks, unhurried but sure. Coraline didn't flinch at Sam's presence anymore. She no longer hesitated when her hand brushed his while passing a plate. And Sam, for all his silence, seemed to watch her in small moments. The way she folded the blankets just so, how she leaned her head while listening to wind through pine. One morning, Sam returned from town with a packet wrapped in brown paper. He set it quietly on the table before going out to tend the chickens. Coraline opened it only after he left. Inside was a spool of blue thread, a small jar of honey, and a folded piece of cream-colored muslin. At the bottom, wrapped separately, lay a wooden comb carved with tiny wildflowers along its back. Her hand trembled slightly as she lifted it. He hadn't said a word. But he had remembered the worn hem of her dress, the way she lingered too long over the last spoonful of sugar. He had noticed. That evening, she baked bread with the honey and served it warm. Sam took a bite, nodded once and said nothing else. But the next morning, when she came down the stairs, the comb rested beside her coffee cup. In late April, a storm brought sleet and wind so fierce it rattled the shutters. Sam tried to fix the back window before it shattered. The beam slipped and caught his shoulder hard against the frame. Coraline heard the crack before he fell, and by the time she reached him, he was clutching his arm, jaw tight, sweat pooling at his hairline. He refused help at first. Said he'd manage. But when the pain grew too loud to hide, he let her lead him to the cot by the fire. She fetched clean water and tore strips from her own nightgown to bind the bruised limb. Her hands were gentle but certain. "You've done this before," he muttered, eyes barely open. "I've had to," she replied. That night as he lay dozing, she kept the fire fed and the babies sleeping. She sat close but not too close, listening to the wind drag its fingers across the roof, watching shadows flicker across his face. The next morning, he awoke to the smell of coffee and found her already dressed, spooning porridge into Eli's mouth with practiced calm. She didn't treat him like an invalid, didn't fuss. She simply took on what he could not do, and left no room for pride or protest. A week later, as his shoulder healed, they walked together to the edge of the field where the soil had thawed. Coraline brought seeds she'd found tucked behind the pantry: sunflowers, marigolds, beans. She knelt and pressed each into the earth with care. Sam stood beside her, silent. "You ever grow flowers before?" he asked after a while. "No," she said. "But I always wanted to." He didn't answer. Just crouched beside her, and handed her a stone from the soil. "You'll want to clear them out. Roots need room." She nodded, adding the stone to a growing pile. On Sundays, they sat on the porch while the babies napped. Sam whittled in silence. Coraline worked a patch into the muslin. The quiet stretched between them like a shawl, comfortable, warm. Then, one cloudless morning, a letter arrived. Sam took it from the postman without ceremony, broke the seal, and read it twice before handing it to Coraline. His face was unreadable. Hers changed slowly, like dawn moving across the land. It was from her former in-laws. Her husband, Peter, had died in an accident weeks prior. The letter, penned by a cousin on behalf of the grieving mother, claimed regret for past misunderstandings and invited Coraline to return as part of the family if she still desired it. The words were thick with pity and pride. Coraline read it in silence, then folded it neatly and set it aside. She didn't cry. She didn't speak. But something in her stilled. A cold draft seemed to move through her, despite the fire. Sam didn't push. That evening, he went about the chores as usual. But when she didn't come down for supper, he found her sitting in the loft, knees drawn to her chest, eyes wide and distant. "Do you want to go back?" he asked gently. She looked at him as though waking from a long sleep. "They didn't want me," she said. "Not when I was whole. Not when I was bleeding. Only now that I'm alone again." "You're not alone." She studied him. "You've never asked me to stay." Sam looked away. "Didn't think I needed to." The silence between them was no longer warm. It thinned, uncertain. "I'm not your wife," she whispered. He met her eyes. "No. But you've been more family than I ever thought I'd find again." The twins stirred then, soft cries from below, and Coraline stood before her knees failed her. She passed him without a word. She held Jacob to her chest that night, rocking with the urgency of someone who needed to hold on to something. Anything. The next day, Sam found her outside by the flower bed, fingers deep in dirt. She wasn't planting. She was digging, careless, relentless, as though trying to reach something that wasn't there. He knelt beside her and gently took her hands. "They can't take you from here," he said. "Not unless you let them." She looked up, mud on her cheeks, eyes full and wet. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Me too." They sat in the dirt for a while, the sun warming their backs, the twins sleeping in the shade behind them. That night, Sam brought down a bundle from the attic. Inside was a small wooden chair, half-carved and unfinished. He set it on the table and lit the lamp. "I started this before," he said, running his hand over the grain. "Didn't know who for." Coraline stepped forward, brushing sawdust from the seat. The curves were uneven, the backrest slightly crooked. But it was sturdy. Made with care. "I'd like to finish it," he said. "For them." She ran her fingers along the edge. "And for me?" Sam hesitated, then nodded. "If you'll have it." That night, she rocked both boys in that chair, humming the tune they had come to know. Outside, the wind passed softly through the trees. No storm. No letter. Just the breath of a home still being built. In the dark, she whispered to the children, not knowing if they understood. "Maybe I was never meant to be a mother the way they wanted. But I can love you. I already do." She closed her eyes, their soft breaths rising and falling against her. And somewhere behind her, Sam placed the letter in the fire, watched it curl into smoke, and walked back to her side. The rain returned as if summoned by old grief. It came not softly this time, but with weight, soaking earth, swelling rivers, drumming a steady rhythm on the cabin roof like an old debt knocking at the door. The air turned cool again, and the wind carried with it the scent of something waiting. Coraline woke before dawn, unsettled. The babies stirred in their cribs, restless under patchwork quilts. She lit a small lamp, checked their foreheads, kissed their cheeks. No fever. Just unease. She dressed slowly, pinning up her hair, wrapping herself in a shawl, and moved through the cabin like a shadow. When Sam came in from the barn, wet to the elbows and quiet-eyed, she met his gaze with the same tightness in her chest. "Someone's coming," he said simply, shaking water from his hat. They both felt it. A kind of stillness before something breaks. By noon, the knock came. Not a timid tap, but a sharp, commanding knock that didn't wait for welcome. Coraline froze mid-step. Sam reached the door first and opened it without ceremony. On the porch stood a wagon draped in oilcloth, its wheels sunk into the softened earth. And beside it, her mother-in-law. She hadn't changed much. Maybe more gray at the temples, more folds under her chin. But her posture was the same, rigid, self-righteous, unyielding. Rain streaked down her bonnet, her boots already caked in the wet clay of the yard. Coraline stood behind Sam, breath shallow. "Well," the woman said, eyeing the cabin. "You've been playing house, I see." Sam didn't answer. His hand rested on the doorframe. "I'm here for Coraline," the woman continued. "It's time she came back. Peter's gone, God rest him, and she belongs to what's left of our family. We got a place now, a proper one. She can be useful again." Coraline didn't speak. Her body had gone stiff, as if her muscles remembered how to be powerless. "She's not going anywhere," Sam said, voice quiet, like thunder from the edge of the plains. The woman narrowed her eyes. "She's not your wife. You've got no right." "I've got more than you ever had." "You're keeping her like property," she snapped. "No. I'm keeping her safe." Behind them, Jacob cried. Eli followed a heartbeat later, their wails sharp against the storm. "Those yours?" the woman asked, arching a brow. "I suppose you've let her play mother too, have you?" Sam didn't answer. But Coraline stepped forward then. Not behind Sam, not beside him, but just beyond him. "They're not mine," she said, her voice steady. But I love them. Her mother-in-law laughed, brittle. Love? What do you know about love? You couldn't give a child to your husband, and you ran when things got hard. I didn't run, Coraline said. You sold me. Like a mule with a bad leg. The woman's lips thinned. I did what was right. You did what was cruel. For a moment, only the rain answered. Then the woman looked past Coraline, into the house, and smirked. You'll regret this. He can't protect you from everything. Sam stepped forward again. Not a threat, just presence. You should go. Or what? His jaw tightened. Or I'll ask the sheriff to escort you out. The sheriff doesn't interfere in family matters. Sam's voice went low. He will if I tell him you're harassing the mother of my children. The woman's face froze. But she's not. She is, Sam said. He didn't look at Coraline when he said it. He didn't have to. His voice had no tremble, no doubt. Coraline blinked, once. Her heart stuttered. The woman scoffed, turned, and sloshed back through the mud without another word. The wagon wheels groaned as they turned, spattering earth. The storm swallowed the last of the sound. Inside, the babies calmed. Coraline shut the door gently and leaned against it, her breath catching in her throat. You didn't have to say that, she whispered. Sam stared into the fire. I know. But you meant it. He nodded once. I did. She crossed the room, her steps careful, unsure. The air between them felt changed, stretched and reformed, like bread that's risen too long but still smells like home. The wind howled against the windows. A crack of thunder passed far off toward the hills. I'm not her daughter, Coraline murmured. Not anymore. Sam turned. No. You're mine now. If you want to be. She looked at him. Truly looked. The man who'd brought her home without expectation, who asked for nothing and gave everything slowly, like water soaking into dry land. I do, she said. That night, the babies grew feverish. Their little bodies burned beneath their clothes, their cheeks flushed deep pink. Coraline panicked first, then steadied. Sam gathered herbs Widow Gray had once gifted. They took shifts, rocking, soothing, wiping sweat from tiny brows. The night stretched long. Wind scratched at the roof. Rain poured like it would never stop. Jacob's breathing went ragged near dawn. Coraline held him against her chest, rocking, whispering his name like a prayer. Come on, little one, she said. You made it through worse. Don't leave now. I just found you. Sam paced the floor with Eli, murmuring low nonsense and fragments of lullabies. The fire dimmed. The lamp guttered. Still they held on. At sunrise, the fevers broke. Coraline wept quietly, rocking Jacob, her tears falling onto his damp curls. Sam knelt beside her, his forehead resting against her shoulder. I thought we were going to lose them, he whispered. But we didn't. No, he breathed. We didn't. They didn't sleep that day. Just sat side by side on the floor, cribs empty, babies asleep across their laps. Later, Sam rose, fetched a battered ledger from the shelf, and sat across from her at the table. He opened it, laid a folded slip of paper flat. What's this? She asked. Property deed. She frowned. You selling? He shook his head. Adding. She looked down. Her name was scrawled in ink beside his. Coraline Eleanor Wren McAllister. The paper shook in her hands. I don't, Sam, this isn't. It's yours too, he said. Always was. I just never wrote it down. She stared at the name. The lines blurred. The room felt too small for the heart inside her chest. I'm not a wife, she said again, voice trembling. Your family. But I'm. He reached across the table and took her hand. You're enough. For them. For me. The rain eased outside, dropping to a hush. The sky, still gray, cracked at the edges with pale gold. She looked down at their hands, calloused and small, weathered and soft, fingers twined without force. I don't know how to be loved, she whispered. Then we'll learn together. The fire cracked behind them. The twins stirred in their cribs, murmuring soft sounds of waking. And somewhere deep in Coraline's chest, where shame had once rooted, something new began to grow, not bold or sudden but real. Something like belonging. Under the wide breadth of summer sky, the land no longer wept. The rains had softened the world, washed it clean, and left behind a hush that felt almost holy. The grass grew higher than Coraline remembered, thick with life, nodding under the wind as if agreeing with some silent truth. The cabin stood proud at the edge of the meadow, a little steadier than before, the porch repaired, the cribs now tucked into the far room where the sun lingered longest. It had been 3 months since her mother-in-law rode away in mud and judgment. 3 months since the fever broke, since Sam placed her name on the deed, since Coraline whispered her first prayer not for escape, but for time to grow into this life she never imagined wanting. The rhythm of the days deepened. Morning brought birdsong and the smell of coffee, afternoon brought chores and giggles from the twins, and evening fell like a quilt over tired shoulders and 2 rocking chairs. Coraline had started humming again, not just to the boys, but to herself, low, content melodies that filled the space between footsteps and silence. She wore color again, blues and soft earth tones. She braided her hair in new ways. Widow Gray had brought her a mirror one morning, and for the first time, Coraline did not turn from her reflection. She stared. She met her own eyes. And she did not flinch. Sam watched her quietly, as he always had. He didn't speak much of love, but he carried it everywhere, hidden in the fixed shutters, in the fresh linens, in the extra nails set in the porch rail where her fingers always rested. And Coraline, for all her cautious heart, had begun to place trust in that kind of love. The kind that didn't ask, didn't demand, only stayed. It was Jacob who first said it. A garbled half-word between porridge and play. Coraline had been sweeping when she heard it. "Ma!" She turned, frozen, the broom still against the floor. The child stood wobbly by the table, face sticky with jam, arms raised. She dropped the broom and scooped him up. His little hands gripped her braid. She kissed his temple, once, twice, her throat tight. She didn't correct him. She didn't want to. That night, she told Sam. He'd been repairing the shed door, lantern light flickering across his brow. She stood in the doorway, arms folded, heart thudding. "He called me Ma." Sam didn't stop working. Just nodded once. "He knows who you are." Coraline stepped down onto the grass. "Do you?" This time, he looked at her. Really looked. "You're the woman who came into this house with nothing, and made it more than I ever had. You're the one who sings them quiet and kisses their bruises. I know who you are. And who am I to you?" His voice came slow, quiet, steady as the river that ran near the edge of the field. "You're my home." She hadn't expected that. Not from him. Not so plain. But it broke something open inside her. Something old and rusted, something she hadn't dared name. He crossed the space between them, took her hands and didn't let go. "You ever want to call this a marriage, Coraline, you say the word. You want it to stay like this, quiet and true, that's fine too. I won't ask more than you want to give." "I already gave it," she whispered. "It just took me time to notice." She kissed him then. Not in fire or frenzy, but in soft certainty. He kissed her back the same way. The next week, Widow Gray came with a basket of eggs and the softest smirk. "So, shall I start sewing a wedding dress or just bring extra pie for supper?" Coraline laughed, a sound fuller than it used to be. "Just pie. We're already wed in every way that matters." Life deepened, as life does when it's earned. The flower bed bloomed. Sunflowers tall and proud, marigolds golden like memory. The boys toddled through the field, fists full of clover, their laughter rising like birds from the brush. Coraline taught them songs. Sam taught them quiet. Between them, the boys learned everything good. But peace never lives forever without test. It came on a dry morning, weeks after the harvest was stored, when the earth felt too still. A rider, dusty, urgent, pulled up to the cabin, his horse panting. "Trouble in town," he said. "It's Larrabee. She's back." Coraline stood on the porch, one hand on Jacob's shoulder. Her breath drew shallow. She's making claims, the man continued. Says the twins ain't yours. Says you're both keeping what isn't rightfully yours. She's calling for court, papers, signatures, custody. Sam thanked the man and sent him off with water. When he turned back to Coraline, her face was pale. She's going to take them, she said. She won't. She'll try. She tried once. And she failed. But this time she's got law on her side. I've got truth on mine. They went into town the next day. Coraline wore the dress Sam had mended by hand, the one with the sky blue stitching. Her braid was neat, her chin held steady. Sam wore his good coat, the one he kept for church and burial. They walked into the sheriff's office as the Larrabee woman stood tall and bitter in the corner. She's a liar, the woman snapped. She's no mother. And he's no husband. Those children need proper raising, not this charade. The sheriff held up a hand. Mrs. Larrabee, he said, you filed no claim of guardianship when your son passed. The boy's death certificate lists no heir, no next of kin other than a cousin now dead. Sam McAllister registered the births after his wife passed. He raised them. This woman, he gestured to Coraline, has been their caretaker longer than any other soul alive. She's not blood. The sheriff looked at Coraline then, eyes kind beneath his brim. Miss Coraline, he said, do you love these children? With everything I am. Do they love you? They call me Ma. That's more than blood, he said. That's bond. The gavel wasn't needed. The woman left in fury, coat flapping like a broken flag. No one stopped her. No one watched. Outside, Coraline leaned against Sam's chest, her breath trembling. It's over, he said. For good this time. I didn't think my heart could carry fear and joy at once. It can, he said, and it does. They went home beneath a sky streaked with red and orange, the twins asleep in the back of the wagon. The wind followed them gently. The trees whispered nothing but peace. That night, Coraline rocked the boys on the porch while Sam brought out a small wooden box. Inside were tokens, a baby rattle, a square of quilt, a faded photo of the woman who gave them life. She was kind, he said. But she wasn't strong. You are both. Coraline took the photo in her hands. They'll know her. They'll know both their mothers. Later, she tucked the box under the crib, kissed both foreheads, and returned to the porch where Sam waited, looking out at the stars. We could have lost them, she said. But we didn't. We could have lost each other. But we didn't. He pulled her close. The porch creaked beneath their weight. I think I was waiting for you, she said. Even when I didn't know it. And I was building something, he replied. Even when I didn't know for who. They sat like that until the moon rose high, until the air grew cool and sweet. Then, hand in hand, they stepped inside. The fire crackled low. The boys dreamed in their cribs. And the cabin, once a shelter of solitude, pulsed now with a kind of love no storm could unmake. In time, they would teach the boys to ride, to read, to pray. In time, Coraline would be called Ma not only by children, but by neighbors, students, and strangers who found comfort in her steadiness. In time, Sam would grow gray and proud beside her, still quiet, still watching. And in time, the story of the woman sold for $1, of the man who saw her not as broken, but as brave, would be told in rocking chairs and front porches, in whispered prayers and newborn names. The rest, they say, is history. And oh, what a history it was!